Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you about Florida legislative history. So why would you want to find legislative history? First, you may look at legislative history to discover the intent behind a piece of legislation. If you can look at the bills and all the amendments that were made, or the reports that came out about a bill, or the debates and the hearings, you may understand a little bit better about why this piece of legislation was made, what were they trying to accomplish with it, and things like that. So finding the legislative history may help you argue what the intended purpose of that legislation was. And kind of in that same vein, it may help you differentiate an issue. If you can find out that, why a bill was made or why the law was crafted the way it was, maybe you can say, look, it was intended to, maybe just include this action and not all of these other actions. And you can say, look, I've got the amended bills and they crossed out that language. So they did not intend for this law to encompass this aspect or something like that. So finding the legislative history may help you to differentiate some issues by looking at how the law was developed. And then finally, if you're proposing a piece of legislation or you're working with a group that is trying to craft legislation, looking at the legislative history of bills on the same topic, you may be able to find out why some succeeded, why some failed, and that would help you in drafting your own piece of legislation. It may also help you find sponsors for your legislation by finding legislators who have sponsored bills on similar topics in the past. Next, to better understand legislative history, it's helpful to understand how a law is made in Florida. And it's very similar to how laws are made at the federal level. First, a citizen, a special interest group, a legislature, somebody has an idea for a law. Next, a bill is drafted, and the bill is then sponsored either by a legislator in the House or a legislator in the Senate, and the bill will be assigned a number. The sponsoring House, where the bill is originating, will then assign the bill to one of their committees that's related to the bill's subject. The committee will study the bill and decide if it should be amended, passed, or failed. If the bill passes, the bill moves to other committees of reference or to the full House. And then either the House or the Senate, wherever it originated, they read the bill and they debate it and they vote on it. If the bill passes the first House, it is then sent to the second House. And then it repeats the same process as it did in the original House or chamber. Meaning it will be sent to committee, it'll be read, and it will be voted on. A bill can go through this process of back and forth between the two houses, so between the House of Representatives and the Senate, until a consensus is reached. Once the bills are identical and they've reached a consensus, it is then sent to the governor for consideration. And the governor can sign the bill into law, allow the bill to become a law without signing it, or the governor can veto the bill. If the bill is vetoed, it still can become law if the legislature overrides the veto by a 2/3 vote in both chambers. If the law is not vetoed or it passes this 2/3 vote, the bill becomes a law and is assigned a session law number. So to find the legislative history for a Florida statute, you want to first look at the history note at the end of a statute, and that will list all of the session law numbers that are related to that statute. So the first one and the oldest session law number will be the one that enacted the statute, and it will be the first iteration of that statute. And then any subsequent session law numbers are ones that have amended it and tweaked it over the years. Once you have the session law numbers, you want to look up each session law and find the bill number that session law came from. And then once you have the bill, you can then find all of the related documents that came out of that bill being in the House and in the Senate. So you're going to find floor debates, you're going to find committee reports, you're going to find hearings, and the most important piece you're going to find is that staff analysis or staff analyses if there's more than one. And basically, the staff analysis is the document that's prepared by the staff of each committee that the bill is assigned to. And they summarize the bill, they explain the current law and how it will be affected by the bill, the fiscal impact of the bill, and any constitutional issues raised, and summarizes any committee amendments. So that staff analysis is really your most important piece of legislative history. It has a lot of content in it and really gives you a good analysis of the law. And then you'll also have potentially governor statements. So the governor may issue a signing statement if they sign the law to enact it, or if they veto it, they may have a veto statement with the bill. And then finally, I want to talk about some resources for Florida legislative history. Florida is really lucky to have a lot of good free resources for doing legislative history research. First is Online Sunshine, the website for the Florida legislature. On this website, you will be able to find the statutes, and you'll also be able to find the laws of Florida or those session laws. And from those session laws, you can find them in the laws of Florida, and it will tell you what the bill number was that crafted that session law. And then you also have the Florida House of Representatives website and the Florida Senate website. They have bills on their website going back to 1997. And you can find the bill language, all the amendments, the staff analyses, and the reports and things like that. So those two websites are really great for legislative history. And in another tutorial, we'll talk about how to use those websites to find legislative history. For older bills, the State Archives of Florida is where you're going to want to go. And there's a little bit of a timeline you need to be aware of when doing Florida legislative history. Any bill before 1969, there really is no legislative history. They weren't required to keep those documents. From 1969 to the 70s, the legislative history can be a little spotty. There may or may not be any documents available, but only the State Archives of Florida would have those. From the late 70s to the 90s, all of the legislative history materials there are available, and they would be available again through the State Archives of Florida. From 1988 moving forward, libraries may have them as well. But then from 1997 to the present, the Florida House of Representatives and the Florida Senate websites will have all of that information. And that is it for this tutorial. As always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can email us, call us, or stop by and see us.